lot. So happy 3 days of home-based learning. Like I promised in the previous lesson, there will be this short video because I've already written back your worksheet 2.4C. So there is space behind as well that I think by now you have recorded quite a fair amount of things about what kind of evaluation criteria you can use. Within this post, I think I promised Mukesh I'm also going to upload the PDF of the criteria that we discussed on the Google Meet lesson, right? So I'll put it together here. Okay, anyway, so I wanted to go through some of the common issues that I read as I marked through the classwork. Okay, there are definitely ways for us to improve. I think maybe there's only about 4 of us that managed to achieve level 3. That's not that many. So it's good for us to go through, see what are some of the common errors. What is the thing that's holding us back? So we start off with first reading the question. Okay, the reason why a lot of us actually lost marks is unfortunately a simple error. Take a look. The question says, when humans benefit from the ecosystem services, you already know that's the link. Cultural service is the given factor, is more important than provisioning service, which is the other factor. So you already know it's a comparison between these two. But if you're going to agree or disagree, it depends on the question. Question say this one is more important. So if you agree, means cultural service is more important, right? If you disagree, then provisioning service is more important, right? So I find it weird that I see quite a few people who wrote like this, I agree that provisioning is more important than cultural services. How can like that? It's the opposite what? If you agree means it has to be the other way around. Okay? So please read carefully what you're writing. Read the question so that you also know how to write. If you disagree, just say you disagree. It's fine. Okay? Don't have to be I agree but it's the opposite. It's weird. Okay? That's the first error. The second error is, okay, it's not an error lah. It's more of the second one is more of a preference, but it's a preference that Cambridge has shared before in the previous syllabus. Okay? You can say that you agree. You can say that you disagree. Better yet, you can say that you agree or disagree to a large extent. But never ever say small extent. I don't think any of us wrote down this one. But I saw one of us who wrote down large extent. So I just want to be clear. Don't write the small extent but. And also don't get confused thinking because I didn't fully agree, right? So I say I agree to a large extent, right? That means I disagree. No, I agree means I agree, okay? That means you must argue for cultural is more important than provisioning. If you don't want, please write I disagree to a large extent. Or I just disagree. Okay? Criteria wise, a lot of you wrote about degree of impact, and you realize actually in my marking that actually I didn't award much for those who wrote degree of impact. In theory, actually it's not actually as relevant. Okay, but we'll talk into that a bit later in this video. Okay, next portion. You see here the instruction here. I disagree. Okay, so this is one example of a statement. I disagree. So disagree means provisioning more important, right? To a large extent, okay. Due to the degree of impact, sure. So far, I haven't seen how is it being used yet. But okay, degree of impact is a criteria that cultural and provisioning services have on people. So this is one example that you can write. Some of you end up rewriting the entire question. I disagree to a large extent because when humans benefit, okay, so also possible, nothing wrong with that. In the interest of time, you may not have the time to do that, so you just need to be clear. Okay, then we go into the criteria. What did you actually use? Some of you wrote down degree of impact. Then the actual thing that you wrote about is nothing to do with degree of impact. Quite weird. Okay, some of you wrote down tangible versus intangible. Right, very clearly provisioning is tangible, cultural is intangible. But this is not a relevant criteria. Right, whether or not human benefit in a tangible manner or intangible manner, both are benefits. So who's to say tangible is better than intangible? So anybody who wrote about this criteria, if it is relatively clearly unpacked, I gave it level 1. But more often than not, if you just wrote about tangible versus intangible, it's level 0. Like legit, it's not really a valid criteria to compare. It's like talking about, remember we were talking about this Korean guy versus this other Korean guy in terms of how suitable they are as suitors for this Korean girl. And then the criteria that you eventually use is whether the toenail ever broke once before or not. Weird, right? As a criteria, not relevant, right? How is this relevant in the context of being boyfriend to this other girl, right? So please make sure it's something that can be used as a criteria to evaluate. Yeah? Just because they're different doesn't mean one is better than the other. Okay? That's a key point lah. Okay? Second one, something that I've accepted a bit more, okay, is the idea of this is provisioning is a daily necessity. So we depend on provisioning for food as opposed to cultural services where we don't need it as much. So for this one, the range that I give is level 1 to level 2. Why no higher than that? Because this is still a very, well, for one, everything is subjective lah, right? If you, like I said, there is no right or wrong answer. But your choice of criteria to say that provisioning is a basic necessity, therefore it's good that we have it, and because we need it for food, for our survival, and blah 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 blah. So you unpack survival, basic needs, okay, all this stuff. This gives you an eval plus with a tick because you've evaluated and you've elaborated what does it mean by being dependent. Okay, but it will be near impossible for you to get an eval minus with a tick when it comes to cultural. How do you prove we don't need culture as much? Right? You can maybe say we don't need it for survival, but that's saying survival is a criteria. Which of course, provisioning is by default going to be the thing that will give you the survival capability and blah 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 blah. So it's next to impossible for you to get a tick next to the eval minus lah. So this means allow you, even if you've elaborated very well, you may be able to get up to level 2. Okay, how to get higher than that? I think some of you may even be able to get level 3 if you're able to bring in, because like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean you only can use one criteria. Some of you use more than one. So that's why you also managed to get up to level 3, because these are the two that I thought was fantastically well argued. Yeah, I don't want to talk about scale yet. I want to talk about date time, because we're talking about the daily necessities, right? So it's related, right? Provisioning service is something that you need daily. Why daily? Then you bring up the same kind of arguments here. But as opposed to cultural services, it's not about whether you need it or you don't need it. It's more that you need it, but not as frequently as a provisioning service. You need it only in certain junctures in time. You can talk about recreational activity and the dominance of other activities in your day-to-day life that's not recreation, and whatever it is lah. So you can elaborate whichever way that you want, as long as an outcome you're able to show cultural service, while helpful, is not something that you use on a daily basis, as compared to provisioning service, where whatever it is that we use, whatever we consume, we have raw materials that is derived from nature, which is something that we use on a daily basis. Okay, I'm writing down some of the terms. I'm not saying you must just use these words. Please remember, listen out for the verbal things that I share as well. Okay, so what I mean by daily basis, things such as the raw materials for the things that we consume. You know, sometimes it's not just food, right? We consume the pencil that we use and blah 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 blah. It's derived from nature. Okay, as opposed to cultural services, where the dominance of work and other use of our time. So recreational activity is not the main use of our time. Therefore, we don't use cultural service as regularly. Right? So this is what is meant by eval plus with a tick and eval minus with a tick. So this is the concept of time. Genuine, I mean, I don't like to say this, but time and scale usually is really just the easiest way for you to score lah. Right? So for scale, given there's so many annotations, I changing color, okay? Scale. When it comes to provisioning services, I change color so still come out red. Oh my lah. Everybody needs provisioning service to be able to survive, as opposed to cultural services, where only those who are interested, because everyone has very interest. This one comes from one of you. I'm sorry, I really wish I recorded down the name, which I thought this was a very brilliant way to elaborate on the eval minus. Right? I mean, cultural service is definitely good, definitely well done for recreation. We get to appreciate and be able to have our mental well-being and whatever it is. But not everybody needs nature or ecosystem services to be able to get cultural service. You can get it out of every other thing. Maybe people like gaming. Maybe people like shopping. That has nothing to do with nature. Yeah, but however, provisioning service, if say for example use the same thing again, right, is something that we would definitely need it. Okay, you use this one to argue also can. This will be how you elaborate from here. Okay, so what's my expectations for you when it comes to correction? I would like for you to please make sure you have recorded down at the very least these two as examples for you to be able to revise. And I purposely didn't give you a paragraph because I'm quite tired of giving you. I really scared people end up memorizing paragraphs. Please don't. Okay, more important is to see what is meant by evaluating to get the plus. Oh, sorry. What? To get the tick. My bad. Okay, this kind of thing is an elaboration. This kind of thing is an elaboration. Okay, so 2 key lessons. I remind you one more time. Talking about the statement. Please make sure you don't sillily go and write down sillily. Stupidly. It's not sillily. Go end up writing I agree, but actually you say the opposite thing. Opposite means you disagree. Then the second one is make sure when you're using a criteria to evaluate, make sure it's a relevant criteria and that it is unpacked for you to get this. Okay, so this is it. Your correction is very simple. Then you realize, like that ni lesson so short. Of course not. Life's not so good, right? Okay, so the second part is I wanted to do an activity for us to cement what we've already learned earlier. And this time around, it's not about essay. Essay, I'm going to mark your current worksheet that you submitted to me, the 2.2. Then after I'll return back, and the next practice will be one full-on essay. Okay, but before we get there, just now during lesson, at least I'm recording this on the Monday. So just now during lesson, we talked about plate tectonics. We finished the entire topic for 1.1 to 1.2. So far nobody asked me, but your TA3 is going to come out until that point. I'm going to continue learning. I mean, we don't just learn for TA, but 1.2 is where we stop. But the idea behind this is I want you to answer this one question on foolscap paper. I know it's been a while. We don't know whether you got foolscap paper or not. On foolscap paper, I want you to write down your name, index number, and class. The question is this. Alright, with the magic of video editing, this is the question. With the aid of an annotated diagram, so this is something that you would have learned before drawing diagrams. Remember the forest, the adaptations and whatnot. So I want to be able to see how you draw your bare bones diagram to illustrate a process. And annotation, I hope you see the difference between annotation and label. You need to elaborate. The process must be written. Explain how a process. So process means annotations I recommend to be numbered. Plate movements occur. And so there are two parts to this question. Explain how plate movements take place. And explain how the plate movements will result in slab pull phenomena. Okay, so two parts to this question. Plate movements and slab pull using an annotated diagram. Alright, on foolscap paper, draw as detailed as you can. Please don't draw something so small. I asked for foolscap paper because I was hoping the diagram can be at least half a paper, that kind of thing, you know. Draw big. I want you to just to get used to get used to drawing again and get used to annotating. Nothing new here. Don't just duplicate your textbook diagrams, please. Then elaborate on how it eventually resulted in slab pull. Okay, so we'll learn from there how we can improve on our annotation skills. Okay, so do the best that you can. Keep in mind the exam, if this were to come out, this may be a 5-mark question. So I want to see the details of the process as well. Okay, that's that. Very short video. See you guys.